The new year is upon us, and if you're like most people, that usually means starting some New Year's resolutions, last maybe a couple weeks, or if you're really hardcore, maybe last a couple months, and then you return back to your normal baseline. Now, there's really nothing truly special about today, January 1st, compared to any other day of the year. That's why I personally do not do New Year's resolutions, because the way I see it, you can start or stop any habit any time of the year, it doesn't really matter. Now, that being said, just because I don't do New Year's resolutions, because I'm weird, doesn't mean you should not. So for most people, it makes a lot of sense. You're likely gonna have this newfound motivation or inspiration to change something about your life, and you might as well take advantage of that. So over the last several years, I have been experimenting with my habits incessantly, and I have found a few, there's three in particular, that have really changed my life in a positive way. And in this video, I wanna share with you guys what those habits are, and maybe if one of them resonates with you, you can consider adding them to your New Year's resolutions for this year. Now, before we dive in, I'm gonna pay special attention to how you can make these sustainable and actually last. Because the biggest issue is, of course, sticking with your New Year's resolutions, right? And motivation is just, being motivated is an emotion just like anything else, and emotions are temporary. So you can't rely on them for long-term behavior change. So what I'm gonna talk about for each habit is how I ended up sticking with it and what I would recommend for you to do as well to make sure that it actually lasts beyond just the first couple weeks or a couple months. So first, daily journaling. And if you're anything like me, you may be rolling your eyes right now. A couple years ago, I thought that journaling was just silly, only for people that didn't really, think deeply by themselves and have introspection and stuff like that. I was wrong. Journaling is actually one of my favorite daily habits because it has this very consistent effect of putting me in a better mood or stopping negative ways of thinking. Now, not all journaling is created equal. I have found certain strategies and methods being more conducive than others. And a big part is actually how you reflect and actually elicit these meaningful connections. Now, this isn't the only way to do it, but this is what worked best for me. So first, I use a journaling app on my iPhone called Day One. Also syncs with my iPad and MacBook. So after tapping on the reminder, it auto-populates this template. And starting from the top, thankful for 3 things, 3 long-term goals, today's targets and what would make today great, affirmations / who I am is the possibility of, and that's all I do in the morning. So I stop at the affirmations part, and these last 3 questions I will do in the evening around 9 p.m. I get another reminder to do those. And those last 3 questions are, number 1, amazing things that happened today, or 3 wins, 3 lessons learned, and then how today could have been better. So in total, when I journal in the morning, it takes me no more than 5 minutes. When I journal in the evening, it takes me, again, usually no longer than 5 minutes. So that's number 1 in making this a sustainable habit, keeping it kind of small and digestible rather than this being this huge unwieldy goal. Reason number 2 would be the actual reminders on my phone. So without that, I would definitely be forgetting to journal morning and evening. Now, a couple things. First of all, yes, you can use a regular paper journal with pen and paper, but the issue I have there is, number 1, privacy. So I want to be as raw and real and unfiltered as possible. And if I have a password protected app on my phone, then I feel much more comfortable to do so. Because if someone just finds my journal, anyone can read a physical journal. Also, it's digital. I can type on my computer, which is a lot faster than me writing. It syncs across all my devices. It's backed up in case one of my devices gets stolen, things like that. Now, second, the gratitude exercise, being thankful for 3 things. That one is key. But I've noticed that if I'm just on autopilot and I just quickly write down 3 random things, it doesn't have as much of an impact compared to if I just sit down and really write a sentence or 2 about each thing and focus on not just like, oh, I'm thankful for my friends and family, being very specific with what I'm actually thankful for. I like to make sure that one of those things is something that I usually take for granted. So for example, one thing recently would be central heating, because here in California, it was freezing this winter, like 55 degrees. Now, when I'm writing out today's 3 goals or the things that I want to get done today, the way I approach that is thinking, if I get these 3 things done, those are wins, and if I get nothing else done today, it's still a good day. So usually one thing is going to be some form of physical activity, whether that's cycling or weight training or doing some body weight or flexibility, mobility exercises. And then the other 2 are usually something related to work or one of my businesses. Now, usually the most profound connections and realizations are going to happen during that evening reflection part. And I'll be making connections about like how I'm perceiving things versus someone else, or making connections across different aspects of my life. And sometimes they can be very transformational. And what I'll actually do is tag those notes so that I can return back to them weeks, months, years later and remind myself what that big realization was. So the powerful thing about writing these down is that, first of all, you can reference them, but it forces you to think in a very linear way, and it actually solidifies your thoughts. Whereas if you were to just think them in your head, you kind of realize only when you start writing it down how non-linear your way of thinking is, or at least I've realized for myself. Now recently I got this as a gift. This is a 1 line a day, 5-year memory book. Super thoughtful gift, which, really appreciate this. So there are 365 pages in this, one for each day of the year, and there's space for 5 years. So you're gonna start, July 4th, 2019, then 2020, 2021, etc. And it's pretty short, so you have to be pretty concise, but it forces you to reflect, and you can kind of see right there on the page while you're writing for that year what happened in the previous years. I think it's a pretty cool idea. Now, to make sure I actually do this every evening, I put this right by my bed, so right before I go to sleep, I'm reminded, oh yeah, take 30 seconds and fill this out. So again, to make sure that these habits or New Year's resolutions actually stick, you want to make sure you have the system in place. So number one, make sure it's very small. So for me, the 5 minutes of journaling, very approachable versus like writing for 30 minutes, right? And then also having the reminders on my phone. Number two, a morning stretch routine. This is one that I've been doing for several years now, probably since my first year of med school back in 2012. And the reason being, we all tend to sit a lot, way more than we should, even those of us that use standing desks like yours truly. So whether it's eating, or you're watching a movie, or you're sitting down making a YouTube video, we tend to sit, and that causes tightening of our hip flexors, tightening and weakening also of our hamstrings. Our cores become weaker, our shoulders are more hunched over, tighter pectoralis major and minor, things like that. So you get these aches and pains, you don't have as good of posture. So every morning I would start with this very brief, back then it was a very brief stretch routine. I think it was just like maybe hamstrings, hip flexors, and cat-cow, something like that. And then now it's evolved over the years because I enjoy it, and it makes me feel really good. If I do it in the morning, I will have less back pain for the rest of the day. There's like a very strong correlation there. But the way it makes me feel even immediately after, I feel pretty good. And I have like this better posture. So I've been motivated to stick with it. And over the years, I've added these various layers. So now it takes me closer to 10, sometimes even 15 minutes, depending on how thorough I want to be. So I will make a separate video about that stretch routine and what's helped me. But really the key here, I think, is just getting your body moving and pushing that mobility first thing in the morning. Now, if you do want to incorporate this into your own daily routine, again, I recommend you start small. So for me, when I first started, there's probably only 3 exercises, and then you can build from there. So start small and then add. And then number 2, also make sure you enjoy it. So don't choose stretches or exercises that you hate. Do something that you like or that makes you feel good. So I don't really enjoy the feeling of holding a stretch, but the feeling I get right immediately after I finish that stretch is usually pretty good. The single most impactful purchase I made in the last 5 years was getting a Kindle. I got a Kindle Paperwhite, and big shout out to Dr. Randy McKnight. He is the all-star from our Day in the Life Orthopedic Surgeon video that now has like over 1 million views. I think it's the most popular video on this channel. And he's the one, so we were in Bali right before starting residency. And I was there with him and a whole bunch of other med school friends. And he was just reading voraciously on his Kindle. And he's the one who actually told me, Kevin, you gotta get a Kindle. This is like something that's not optional, it's mandatory. And I was trying to pinch pennies, and I was gonna get the regular Kindle, but then he convinced me, no, you gotta get the Paperwhite because the Paperwhite has the actual light built in. Whereas for the regular Kindle, you would need an external light. And I'm so glad I listened to him. So with that Paperwhite, I have been reading so much more than I would ever before. So the ironic thing is I don't actually have my Kindle with me right now. I forgot it in Vegas before I went to the airport. If those of you who follow me on Instagram saw that story. As you guys saw, tragedy struck earlier today when I forgot my Kindle at my apartment, but it's all good because I was able to write 2 novels and cure cancer on my short 1-hour flight. And I could go on for days about the benefits of reading. I mean, you're getting all this condensed wisdom from the smartest minds in history. It's a no-brainer. You should be reading. But again, with any of these habits, you have to figure out how to make it sustainable and make it actually stick. So number 1, the Kindle to me was way more convenient than reading an actual book. It fits in your hand. It's super portable. It's digital. It has a built-in light so you can read in the dark or on the plane when the lights are off. But the more important thing I think is making sure you actually enjoy what you're reading. So if you're reading a book that you don't actually enjoy, you're not going to stick with it, right? But if you're reading things that just draw your natural interest, then you're much more likely to stick with that habit. So I tend to go with the self-development books or the business books or the finance books. I like a lot of nonfiction, but recently I did read this book called How to Get Filthy Rich in Rising Asia. And that was a fiction book and one of my favorites in a long time. I could not put the book down. I was up late reading it and definitely sacrificed some sleep, but it was so worth it. Now I personally read in bed right before I sleep. I think it's a nice way to wind down. And what I recommend is you don't associate any like unattainable goals with it. Don't say, oh, I need to read 50 pages at night or for 45 minutes or whatever. Just say I'm going to read, and whether that's 1 page or 5 pages or 10, doesn't matter. Just as long as you're reading a little bit every single day, you're establishing the habit, and then you can always scale and build and ramp up from there. Okay, this video is getting kind of long, but there are 2 honorable mentions that didn't quite make the cut. So number 1 would be daily physical activity. I try to lift weights 5 times a week. I try to cycle 1 or 2 times per week. And if I'm not doing one of those, then I try to at least do some body weight exercise or some mobility training, things like that. It just makes me feel much better. And sticking to that habit has definitely been a positive influence on my life. Now, second, intermittent fasting. I've been doing this for several months now. And I'll be making a video on the Mental Insiders channel about the actual research and then the pros and cons of intermittent fasting. For me, beyond the health benefits, the 2 main things are, number 1, I spend less time having to prepare food or eat food. I can just eat in that 8-hour feeding window, which is very convenient. And then number 2, I have inflammatory bowel disease, so I find myself using the bathroom less when I restrict my eating to a shorter time frame. So let me know what habits, whether any of the ones mentioned in this video or something completely different, what are you planning on implementing in your life now in 2020? As always, thank you all so much for watching. Much love to you all, and I will see you guys in the next one.